Bible story? Today's story is how Laban tricked Jacob. It's found in Genesis 29 through Genesis 31. When Laban heard that Jacob had arrived, he hurried to welcome him. Laban was glad to hear from his sister Rebekah and to meet her favorite son. At first, he was very kind to Jacob. Jacob helped his uncle. By the end of the month, Laban said, "Let me pay you for your work. How much do you want?" Jacob replied, "I will serve you faithfully for 7 years, if then you will give me your beautiful daughter Rachel to be my wife." Jacob loved Rachel and wanted to marry her. He loved her so much that the 7 years seemed like only a few days. When the 7 years were up, Jacob reminded his uncle of their agreement. Laban arranged a marriage feast and invited many friends to the wedding. In the evening, he brought the bride to Jacob. A veil covered her face so no one could see her. This was the custom. After the ceremony, Jacob wanted to see his bride. He lifted the veil, but it was not beautiful Rachel whom he loved. Instead, it was her older sister, Leah. How unhappy he was. His uncle had tricked him. Perhaps Jacob remembered how he had tricked his blind father and cheated his brother out of the blessing. Jacob demanded of Laban, "What have you done to me? Didn't I work 7 years for Rachel? Then why did you cheat me?" Laban said, "It is not the custom in our country to let the younger daughter marry first. If you'll serve me for 7 more years, you may have Rachel also for your wife." In those days, most men had several wives. Because Jacob loved Rachel, he decided to work for her too, and Rachel too became his wife. After 14 years, Jacob wanted to return to Canaan. Laban did not want him to go. "While you have been with me," he told Jacob, "the Lord has blessed me for your sake." Jacob said, "But how am I to provide for my family?" Laban agreed to let Jacob have part of the cattle and sheep and goats. Jacob separated these from Laban's. Jacob had his sons take care of them while he looked after Laban's flocks. And God blessed Jacob and increased his possessions. Jacob became rich. By this time, Jacob was the father of 11 sons and a daughter. Because Jacob became rich, Laban's sons were jealous. They said Jacob had got his riches dishonestly. Laban too began to feel envious. The angel of God spoke to Jacob in a dream and said, "I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the stone and made a promise to me. The time has come for you to return to your people in Canaan. I will be with you." Jacob was afraid Laban would not let him take Leah and Rachel to far-off Canaan. Jacob decided to go away secretly. He waited until Laban went to shear the sheep. Then he called Leah and Rachel out into the field and said, "Your father no longer feels kindly towards me. God has told me to return to Canaan." "We are ready to go," they replied. "God is with you." Busy days followed. Jacob got ready to start out on the long road that he had traveled 20 years before. The sheep, the goats, the cattle, and the camels were all brought from the fields. The servants drove the animals, while Jacob's wives and children rode on camels. Across the fields they went, and onto the road, which wound along the lonely wilderness. Wild mountains were on one side, and on the other side the dreary desert sand stretched into space. Finally, they came to a camping place at Mount Gilead. Here they stopped to rest. Things were happening back at Haran. Someone told Laban that Jacob had gone away and had taken everything he owned. How angry Laban was. "I shall overtake him," Laban decided. Perhaps he planned to make Jacob return to Haran. He took several men and hurried after Jacob's company. For 7 days they followed fast. At last they saw the tents Jacob had pitched in Mount Gilead. Before they reached Gilead, God warned Laban not to harm Jacob. God caused Laban's anger to cool. He did not even quarrel with Jacob. Afterward, Jacob set up a stone for a pillar, and the other men gathered stones together in a heap. Laban called the heap of stones Mizpah, which means a watchtower. And he said to Jacob, "May God watch over us while we are absent from each other." Then, bidding his daughters and their children a loving goodbye, he started back to his home at Haran. Jacob and his family traveled on towards Canaan. Wow, good stories. What's your favorite story? let me know.